Hi, so you're watching this if you're looking to find out how you can verify your guest and help protect your hospitality business, your short-term rental, a bit more, especially when they come and book direct, hopefully via your Boostly website or via your ways of taking direct bookings. So this is a re-recording of an earlier training. This recording is probably going to be around about 15 minutes. The previous one was about 45 minutes. We were answering questions live in a room, but hopefully this will give you all the information you need to take the next steps and to really go out there and make sure you're protecting your short-term rental business as much as possible. So let's get started. So the reason we've made this training is because many hosts come to us, and one of the first questions when it comes down to direct bookings is, why do a direct booking? Airbnb verifies my guests, and I can also see reviews of the guests, so I feel so much more confident hosting them. Plus, they give me air cover. How do I get that same protection when somebody comes and books direct? So I'm going to cover how you can get protection when they come and book direct. But first of all, let me just show you why some of this confidence might be a bit misplaced. So why is that not the case? Why should we not necessarily trust everything from the OTA platform, from Airbnb in particular? So Airbnb do not check your guest ID every time. It only verifies it when the account was open. You'll notice on some of your guests, they may have opened their account 5-6 years ago now, or sometimes even longer. Those verifications were done at the time, and a bit like what you could do now, you can open an account and you could then allow your friends, family, you could allow anybody to go and use that account. Now, they shouldn't, according to Airbnb terms, but because Airbnb aren't checking ID of the guest each time, basically anybody could be using that account by the time they come and stay in your property. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is there's lots of new guests using the platforms. More and more people are traveling in entire properties instead of, say, hotel rooms and things like that. Because of that, as more people are using the platform, there's many more guests on there. And you may have noticed a change, especially since the pandemic, that there's more and more people without verified reviews on there. So if you've got the settings where it'll allow people to book without reviews, then you may be getting more of those guests. And of course, there's no way of verifying that guest or knowing that guest. That's exactly the same as if they was to book direct. You wouldn't know if they've had previous good or bad experiences or other hosts have. The third reason is there's lots of bots and automation now. So this is something which I didn't know until recently, is that big management companies, to save having to review every single guest and to save time, they use automation and basically software which will automatically review a guest. Now, they may not give an honest review. Those reviews will naturally say, "Great guest, thanks for staying," something like that, something very basic, because it's got to be generic for all of their guests. What that means is there'll be times where they've had a bad guest stay and still the automation will have given them a good review if they've forgotten to turn off that review or give them an honest review. And because of that, you may get times where you get an Airbnb guest to come and stay in your property. Obviously, Airbnb have verified their ID at the start, which could have been 3 years ago, as we've said in reason number one. And then they may have one or two good reviews, and upon checking those reviews, you may feel confident hosting them. Now, those good reviews could have been posted by automation or by a bot, and ultimately that could just still be a very bad guest, causing you time, hassle, and problems. And of course, the reason you're watching this video or within the Boostly kind of network is because you're looking to get more bookings direct, yes, but presumably Airbnb won't be your only channel. So if you're listed on places like Booking.com, VRBO, Expedia, etc., those don't verify or give you previous guest reviews always. So it's just really good to know what I'm about to teach you today on how you can help to verify your guest. So is Airbnb secure overall? What happens if there's issues? So let's just dive into that a little bit. Host cover is not bad, is what I say. It's much better than some of the other OTAs. So host cover provides some protection, but it does depend. The host cover will depend on the situation, the case officer that you are reporting to, and obviously different people make different decisions, and it will depend on what damages occurred to what they will cover. So, give an example of that is I've had times where uh, one problem we've had through Airbnb wasn't covered, and then still continuing talking, and a caseworker then goes off shift, another one comes on, and that one sees the situation differently. So it does depend. You may be covered, you may not be covered. The other thing is they don't always cover, obviously, your time or the emotional issue of having to go to your unit and sort out. And sometimes they won't even cover some of the costs. I mean, I know times where they won't agree that some of the extra cleaning was required. Well, what's required to get your unit back up and running, ready for the next guest. So it may provide some cover, and certainly I've had good experiences. I've had bad experiences of host cover, but ultimately, you don't want to be putting all your eggs in one basket and relying just solely on your bookings from Airbnb. So you need to solve this issue of how do you get more protection when people are booking direct. As we said about good guest reviews, they're semi-useful because if there's a guest with bad review, you're obviously going to be uncomfortable hosting them. But due to everything I mentioned on the last slide, there may be automation or the reviews might not be 100% trustworthy, so you can't overly rely on them. So let's talk about the other OTAs, VRBO. They do give you reviews, but as far as I'm aware, they don't give you any kind of host cover. So you might be able to see previous guest reviews, but same as previous, how much you can trust those reviews just depends on if they've had automation review them or real people. And then Booking.com, I did hear a host the other day say to me, but surely Booking.com gives you some form of host cover. And the answer is no, they don't. You are completely on your own. They will not do anything if you've got a guest who has caused issues. They will report the guest for misconduct. They might kick them off their platform, maybe not, but they won't compensate you for any sort of damage or anything like that. In most cases, that has changed recently, where they have now got some payout protection. But the best thing to do, depending on when you're watching this video, is go and check it. I've not heard of one successful case of claiming any compensation through Booking.com to date. So I would say don't rely on that. And of course, on Booking.com, you can't see previous guest reviews. So a bit like if you was to get a direct booking, you need to know how to verify your guest if they're booking via Booking.com in the same way. So how do I protect my short-term rental? So obviously this is what I found works for me. You don't have to copy this, or you don't have to put this system into your business, but this is an example of what I do. So before I show you what I do, these are things that you can do to protect your short-term rental. You can verify your guests, so you can get the ID and know who they are. You can take security deposits. It's a great way of protecting your property, because if guests have got skin in the game, they're less likely to cause damage. And if they do cause damage, you've got some money that you can retain to pay for that damage. I recommend that everybody listening gets guests to sign terms of stay or terms and conditions, and that basically outlines your responsibility to them and their responsibility to you. And that is basically, if it needs to go a step further and you need to get solicitors, attorneys involved, then just having that in place is just so important. Another way you can protect your properties is if you've got long stay, midterm stays. Regular cleans are advised because it helps, certainly here in the UK, to show that there's no exclusive possession. So in other words, it doesn't make it a long-term let. It just means that you retain possession, so you can go into your property, and that's shown by the sheer fact they've got cleaning, and that's what makes it different from a long-term let. Obviously, it's one of the things you get in a hotel, which people can't claim they live in hotels or squatters' rights in hotels and things like that. Obviously, I'm no legal expert, and it does depend on your local area, so please check with your local regulations. But these are some of the ways you can protect your short-term rental. So moving on, what do I check? So this is, as I said before, what works for me, and you may find this useful. So guest ID matches. So I check guest ID. I check the signature matches. I check for local postcodes, Google or Facebook check, and I do security deposit paid. But let me show you what this looks like. So I'm just going to exit the slides and show you what this looks like in real terms. So let's show you our real terms. So when guests book with us, we send them these steps. And if you do want any examples of what emails to send your guests, then there is some in the vault. But this is just what I send to my guests. So I get a welcome video. And step number 2 is to get them to fill in this form. So this is the guest registration. They'll see this, and then they'll go through to basically 12, 13 questions where we'll collect all their information. We take things like their name, the telephone number, email address, which I'll come back to why that's important at the end, what dates they're staying, just so we know what stay in case they've got a guest with the same name across 2 different properties, the purpose of their stay. So we're collecting information that will help us market towards more people in the future. How many guests will be staying in the property, bed layouts, the names of any guests over 16, just for, again, with security purposes. We get them to agree to our terms. So there is a copy of terms within the files page of the Boostly Facebook. I recommend you get your own terms written up by solicitors or attorneys if you decide to do so. If you do decide to take a copy, make sure you're changing it to your business. And this is everything that you are stating is your responsibility to your guest and your guest's responsibility to you. I then get my guests to sign and agree. So signature, agree. We get them to upload their ID. Where is it? There it is. Upload one form of identification, which they just upload to this form. We ask a few communication questions. Do they stay in the area frequently? So we know, if there's frequently, that we want to make sure we're giving them a call so we can remarket to them, and just seeing how often they stay. Can we be their preferred place to stay? And then lastly, I mentioned, obviously, we take their email address. And of course, Boostly is all about how you can grow your direct bookings. So taking their email address is one thing, but you can then link forms like this to your email list, wherever that may be, in your CRM. And we encourage people to tick this box by giving them a 10% off their next trip. And that then means that we've got their email and we can then remarket to them in the future. So that's our form. And going back to the slides. So what do we check? So that form is sent across and we check their ID matches the name of the guest. So the person who's booked, does that ID match the name of the person booked? And that is how we can verify that it is that guest who's booked, who's coming to stay. We can check their signature matches their ID as well. So the signature that they had to squiggle on that form I've just shown you, the electronic online form, matches their ID. We can also check if it is a driving license. We can check if it's a local postcode. The reason we do that is because if it's a local postcode and they're coming to stay just a few miles down the road, it's more likely to be a party, especially if it's a couple of nights stay on a Friday, Saturday night, or a one-night stay. You really want to be checking those postcodes if you've got the ability to do so. If there's anything that spooks us or anything that we're worried about, we can do a quick Google search. We've got the name of the guest now. We can search them. We can do a Facebook check. We wouldn't always do that, but on one occasion, just as a quick story, there was one which had me worried, which was a Booking.com guest. And I'd done a quick search, and it turns out he was wanted for fraud. So I let Booking.com know we were uncomfortable hosting the stay, and we got it all cancelled down because I didn't want somebody who could be defrauding me coming to stay. And that was by doing a quick Google search after getting the guest ID and all the details. Security deposit as well. I take a security deposit. How you take a security deposit and what amount is for you to decide in your business. But I find that by guests having some form of security deposit, then it does help prevent problems, of course. So going back to the tech that I use, is I've not included it on here. The form that you saw, or where we've taken that details, I use Jotform, and you can just give Jotform a Google. They cost about $20, $25 a month. And they allow you to build a nice, pretty looking form that you can send to your guests on a link. You could use just Google Forms. And there's many of these kind of form builders out there. These are just the ones which you can use. Google Forms is free, and that's maybe the most cost effective way. It's not quite as tidy as the one that I showed you, but there's lots of ways that you can set up your the way that you're looking to take these checks. So what could I do to be even more secure? So I could ask my guest to actually be in the photo when they upload the ID. So I could ask my guest to take a photo of them, the ID next to their face and them in the picture. And that confirms, because they're with their ID, their face is in the picture, their face is on the ID, it really super confirms that is who is filling in that form. But it just feels a step too far. It feels too much. So I don't do that, but something else that you may consider. I could take a higher security deposit. And again, the higher the security deposit, it might put more guests off, obviously, from booking, but also it means that the ones that do book have got more skin in the game and you're more likely to protect your homes or your properties. And the other thing that I could do, and I don't do, is on that form, you notice there was no address taken. And the reason being that I don't take the address is I've never needed to date. I've hosted over 3,000 guests across 24 properties, but it is something which I've considered. And the reason to take address would be that if you've got their address, you can post them out, court summons or a fine, whatever it is, an invoice. So it protects you a little bit more if you do have their address. And of course, you could check their address if it matches the one on the ID, if it's a driving license, things like that. So what other options are there? So what I've shown you on this so far is how you can set up your own version with very little cost or even no cost if you're using Google Forms, and how you can do some checks on your guest. And that will certainly put off. The idea is that this won't 100% protect you. You're not getting anybody who's going to pay you if that guest does cause problems, but you're putting off the majority of guests who would book to have a party because there's more checks in place than the average host. What other options are there if you want more protection? So some property management systems have their own guest verification method. So if you have a property management system, I recommend that you send your property management system a message or go onto their help portal and to ask, what system do you have in place for you to verify my guest? How much does it protect me? And they'll be able to show you that, obviously, themselves. There's an awesome company called Superhog. Mark Simpson talks about this in the book Direct Blueprint. If you haven't heard of that, give it a Google and go and buy that book. That Superhog is run by some people who we've interviewed. So Hannah is one of the people who works for Superhog. She's in the Boostly group if you want to send her a message. And there's also podcasts from Boostly with the owners of Superhog. We are a big, big fan, as you can hear. So what is Superhog? Let me just show you. Superhog will basically do everything that I've just shown you, but they'll have their own system. So all you do is pay them to do what I've just shown you. And they have guest screening, ID capture, damage waiver. So that's instead of a damage deposit, you can get your guest to pay you an amount. And that means that if there is damage, you can't charge them. But the idea being is that damage waiver is yours to keep. And that will build up in a pot. So if there is damage, you use the money from the damage waivers. And if there isn't damage, you've got an extra income, which is really cool. Damage deposit is what we've talked about, and damage protection, which is more insurance based. But they do all of this, and best thing to do to find out more, all their pricing, is to come to superhog.com and book a demo with them. Another similar sort of service is Safely. So let me show you them. A little bit more pricey from what I understand. I don't use them, but I know some good friends of mine who use Safely and rave about them. So this is another guest checking or verification service, and you can go to safely.com and get a demo, or have a look at more information there. They will do guest verification and protection for you on your behalf. So again, another one which, if you're getting direct bookings or if you're getting bookings from any platform, this is good to know about. Charge automation. So charge automation is a little bit different. It's not known for the guest verification, but it does check guest IDs, or at least ask your guest for ID. It also takes damage deposits, and it also will give your guest a guidebook. So it's actually a really smooth way of taking of getting a lot of the information from your guest and providing them a better experience. So again, same as before, go to chargeautomation.com. You can get started for free. There's a free trial and you can find out more about them. But that is another service which will help you to verify your guests if they're booking direct or via any of the OTAs that you want more protection from. You could charge a bigger security deposit, and you could literally be as basic as take Stripe, for instance, and just send them a link, take a big security deposit every time your guest comes to stay with you. And that would help protect your property, because if there's a problem, you can take it from the security deposit. If there's no problem, you refund it. And unfortunately, you will be getting fees for taking the deposit and then refunding it. But ultimately, it gives you protection. So that's another way that you can help protect your home. And if none of these methods are, just floating your boat and making it clear that there's lots of ways that you can verify your guest, you can go to an awesome website called strhub.com. And this basically is run by Christina Crump. She is a fellow host who has put together a database of all the services that you as a host could be using. And that will be an up-to-date place where you can go to and see if there's any more, because as I record this, obviously I've mentioned 3 there, but there will be more in the world, and obviously there'll be more as more tech gets developed. So go to strhub.com for more options as well. So yeah, that is everything from me. If there are any questions, all you need to do is pop them in the Boostly Facebook group. That is the best place, and you can tag me in, Liam Carolan. If you put at Liam Carolan, I will pop up. That's better than sending me a DM or anything like that. But yeah, I hope this is useful. So just to summarize, we've covered why not to trust Airbnb fully. You don't want to be fully reliant on their host cover and verification. We've covered what the other platforms do. We've also covered ways that you can protect your STR. So you can verify your guests, take security deposits, terms of stay, regular cleans. And then we've covered what I check and the way that I do it within my business, using Jotform and taking a security deposit. We've covered how else you can do it. You can use your own PMS, you can use Superhog, safely, charge automation, and all of that good stuff. So I hope this has been useful. Thanks very much for watching, and I wish you all the best in your direct booking journey.